Watch this.
It seemed everyone had something to say about an "Everyone is Welcome Here" poster. West Ada parents and teachers had a chance to tell trustees what they thought about the policy face to face and hear what they had to say for the first time.
Good evening,
Just not sure they got the answers they were looking for. It's time to toast the 1920s, a decade that brought us the Bob, a lack of booze, and the Boise Depot. One of the city's most iconic buildings is turning 100 tomorrow, so we're getting our pre-funk on today. Speaking of celebrating, a bottle of bubbly always helps. And you know what pairs best with champagne? How about some caviar from Idaho? Yeah, you can enjoy the delicacy of debutantes right here in Boise.
So we need you to act not for politics, not to stay in power, not to keep your jobs. We need you to act like the adults in the room and stand up for all of the kids, not just the ones that are easy. Thank you.
Mrs. Armstrong, just one of the 24 speakers from last night's West Ada School Board meeting. The first meeting since district administrators told sixth grade history teacher, Sarah Inama, she had to take down 2 inclusive posters from her Lewis and Clark middle school classroom. Sarah says she was told her posters were political and personal opinion, since not everyone believes the basic message behind those sentiments. Sarah refused and put the "Everyone is Welcome Here" poster back up, and weeks later, she brought her story to us. Well, since then, we've asked repeatedly to speak with anyone from the district or a member of the board to find out how an "Everyone is Welcome Here" poster violates District Policy 401.2, which says classrooms should be content neutral. And we've been denied every single time. Other than internal memos and political podcasts, we have yet to hear what the board has to say about the policy they amended back in 2022. And the reason, as they mentioned last night, is because they just couldn't agree on a response, despite the overwhelming beliefs and criticisms from those that elected them.
Welcome to the regular board meeting for the Board of Trustees for the West Ada School District.
More than 150 people packed into the West Ada boardroom.
We have had 24 people sign up. We will allow all 24 to speak.
For the chance to tell the trustees directly,
this is absolutely ridiculous and utterly embarrassing for West Ada, for Idaho, and for humanity.
And exactly how they felt about requiring the removal of an "Everyone is Welcome Here" poster.
Posters that foster inclusion based on race, color, national origin, religion, or any of the other federal protected classes ought to be required in every classroom and not banned.
Parents and teachers overwhelmingly supported Sarah and her sign.
To interpret messages of belonging as political simply because of a rainbow clip art, or skin tones for that matter, and for the district to validate that perception is disheartening and demeaning as an educator.
And they questioned how it was handled by the district.
It has been said that this policy is meant to protect teachers from complaints, but we don't need protection, we need collaboration. But the way this policy has been implemented hasn't prevented conflict. It has fueled confusion and mistrust.
What is the political opinion? I still have not been told that. For an opinion to be an opinion, it's that people don't agree on something. So I just want to know what that is.
Even Sarah Inama took her 2 minutes.
Programs. Is it the graphics with the hands?
Thank you.
Okay. It's okay. I will email the rest.
And then part of another.
You're welcome to my time if you'd like to talk more.
Which she concluded this way.
I'm not here to reconcile this for me personally, but I truly feel that you need to remember the basic fundamentals of public education and what this country is and what the law is for accepting and protecting all students in our schools, because this message of your response has been very detrimental to our students, their families, and our staff. Thank you.
Of course, all of these thoughts and feelings had already been shared with the district and the board over the last several weeks.
It's even more embarrassing that we have not shouted from any and all media platform that we made a mistake and that we love and welcome all students in a public school.
But what we hadn't heard until Monday night was from the West Ada Board trustees, who put this policy in place.
I want to be clear, I'm in full support of the posters that were asked to be removed, for the very same reasons many of you are here tonight. When I voted on policy 401.2 a few years ago, I did so to keep politics out of the classrooms. I still believe this is the right thing for our students. What I didn't anticipate was that a message of inclusion or words on primary colors could be seen as political. I won't accept that.
It's tricky. I think we all agree we live in a highly politicized world, yes? I mean, it matters right now what kind of car I drive. I mean, can we agree? That's crazy. I do believe the best thing we can do is try and keep as much conflict out of the classroom as possible. That by no means is at all to insinuate that all people should not be welcome in the classroom at all. That is just to say the debate, the discussion of what is or isn't political, that's the piece that I would like to keep out of classrooms.
But if you lead with curiosity and you try to understand, you may have an answer to some of the questions that right now seem perplexing. How is it possible that this could be interpreted any other way? How is it possible that anyone could see things differently than I can? But there's been a sort of a repeated call to acknowledge a mistake. And I want to say in the clearest possible terms, I think that everything was done right here.
Everything was done correctly here, Trustee Benetti? From the interpretation of policy to Sarah's decision to put it back up to the entire district refusing to answer questions, but instead blaming the media for turning it into a controversy, that was all done correctly. For what it's worth, Dave Benetti, someone who wanted to be a West Ada trustee during the pandemic, riding in on a wave of not wanting the school board to make broad, sweeping decisions for everyone, apparently is now okay with the board making broad, sweeping decisions for everyone. How about leading with curiosity, which you kind of pointed out? I believe that was what we and many others were trying to do when we wanted to know how this poster could possibly be considered a personal opinion and how it violates a content-neutral policy. We were denied every opportunity, over and over. And one of those who showed up last night, hoping to hear some sort of explanation to those questions, he used to sit at the head table. Steve Smiley spent 45 years as a teacher, starting at a West Ada school or West Ada Middle School. Then he went on to Boise State. He was also a state legislator in between there. And then when his teaching career concluded, he was appointed to the West Ada School Board in 2016 and served until 2020. Steve says making every child feel welcome was one of the most important things he did as a teacher and as a trustee.
As board members, you set policy that is for the betterment of the district.
What made you want to show up last night then?
Because I wanted to say that I knew what was going on and I knew where they were.
You know, the rule of holes is when you find yourself in one, stop digging. We're supposed to be on the same team. We are supposed to be here for the children we teach.
What do you mean by that?
We have the same object in mind, educating children. And we're supposed to be doing it together. You have to trust your superintendent. You have to trust your academic directors, and most importantly, your mid-level managers.
But they all said to get rid of the poster.
Well, they did. And that's where I thought that maybe that should have been thought through a little better.
Well, is this a policy thing, or is this an interpretation of the policy?
I think it was the interpretation of the policy where I disagree. I don't think the policy was designed to make kids feel like they were not welcome somehow. I guess this has become controversial now. You were there for the board saying what they said last night.
Mm-hmm. But did it answer the question of why this poster violated the policy?
I think...
Did you get that answer?
I didn't.
You didn't get the answer why it violated the policy, but did you hear a contrition of like, we didn't handle this properly?
No.
Do you think it changes anything?
The thing I'm hoping is it changes going forward.
Changing what?
How that we handle a situation like this in a classroom.
Well, going forward is what the West Ada Board of Trustees spent the rest of the meeting last night discussing, specifically breaking up Policy 401.2 into other policies. One of the things they are hoping to do is to define what content neutral is, or rather what it is not. Anything currently the subject of intense public argument, disagreement, or approval, or disapproval, I should say, that would be considered not content neutral, but try finding anything that people don't disagree on these days. Any political message, any contentious ideology, belief, or social issue, and anything likely to incite disruption, distraction, or division within the school community, which, as you can imagine, still sounds like a pretty broad definition of content neutral. They're also considering, though, establishing a visual review committee that will review all appeals of visual content in classrooms. The committee will consist of at least 5 people, majority of which will be district parents. Sarah told us last night she still hasn't heard anything new from the district about the fate of her "Everyone is Welcome Here" poster, which means she still has until the beginning of next year to remove it. On the state legislature, well, they left home for the year nearly 2 weeks ago. They did leave some unfinished business back there with the governor. And as an epilogue of the 2025 session, Governor Brad Little had one last move of his own, a veto on a budget item very close to the gentleman on the second floor's heart. Joe Paris joins me now to see, Joe, the governor's veto of a budget item. How does this happen?
Okay, so this is actually a little quirky nuance in Idaho law. And strictly in budget bills, the governor has line item veto authority, meaning that he can just say no to one section or one item in a budget. And that's exactly what happened in this situation. Lawmakers approved a budget that would have moved a little more than $650,000 from the governor's emergency fund, and it would send that money to the general fund. And the governor simply crossed that out, preserving the money that he had discretion over. In his veto letter, Governor Little explained that in the veto, he says he used the emergency fund in recent years to do things like support the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students, to fight the fentanyl crisis, and to promote border security. And Governor Little's action was actually praised by the family of Kaylee Gonsalves, one of the 4 students that were murdered in 2022 at an off-campus home. Governor Little had committed up to $1 million from that fund as investigators tracked down who ended up being Brian Kohberger, innocent until proven guilty, but the prime suspect in this case. And the Gonsalves family, reacting to this veto, writes to me, quote, "We are in support of keeping the governor's emergency fund. In a case like ours, where a horrible tragedy occurred in a small jurisdiction in Idaho, the promise of a governor who prioritizes justice over dollars was pivotal in our case. Using the emergency fund to allocate resources to Moscow in order for a proper investigation to be done," they write, "was one of the most critical pieces in bringing the defendant to justice," end quote. Well, Republican leadership at the State House, Brian, they tell me that they don't think lawmakers will call themselves back into session to override the veto, something they have the power to do.
That still applies to line item vetoes?
Yeah, they could come back and they could try, and they would need 2/3 of lawmakers to call themselves back. And I can tell you, there is frustration from some conservative lawmakers. They point out that the governor has access to some $31 million in emergency funds. To access that $31 million, all he would need to do is declare an emergency. So
this is just extra then?
This is on top of that. This is a different fund. Some lawmakers feel like this was unnecessary, and they question why the governor wants that money. Still, though, the governor, he's the leader of the state of Idaho. It's under his authority.
All right, that makes it his second veto of the session, am I correct?
That's right, yeah.
All right. Thank you very much, Joe. Well, speaking of laws, it is now easier to get ivermectin over the counter. Governor Little signed Senate Bill 1211. That's one of the last things he did sign this session. It goes into effect immediately. Of course, the FDA has not approved ivermectin for treating COVID or even the common cold, but it is approved for specific parasitic conditions. The CDC warns taking large doses of ivermectin can be dangerous, and it also could cause serious side effects. But also, the FDA still has to approve it for over-the-counter status, and still don't know if any pharmacies are going to serve it that way. You know, pioneers first passed through this valley by horseback or by covered wagon or even on foot. And when the city of Boise was established in 1863, that was still the way it was. 20 years later, when the railroad came to southern Idaho, the City of Trees was not one of those stops, believe it or not. Imagine, after punching through the Continental Divide, apparently that incline from the bench into Boise was just too much for the railroads. But eventually Boise would get rail service and then the station where trains would stop. That happened 100 years ago this week when the most conspicuous campanile in all of Boise was built. It's the one benchmark of Boise that stands above the rest.
It's a landmark.
But the Boise Depot, becoming an icon, that would take decades to initiate. Train travel in southern Idaho, in the beginning, bypassed Boise to the south, until 1887, when the Oregon Short Line Railroad built a branch line to Boise's bench and the adjoining wooden building. 7 years later, they laid a dead-end spur into downtown.
We had a depot down on Front Street and 10th, right at the corner there.
Trains would have a tower as a target. It just wasn't 96 feet tall, yet. That idea was still 30 years away.
The citizens of Boise had been pushing and asking for passenger rail for decades at this point, and to be on the main line.
To get that done meant a new depot and a return to the bench in a revival of the Spanish-style mission, the first of its kind in the City of Trees.
The key things about it are its stucco walls, the campanile, or what we call typically the bell tower, the asymmetrical two wings of the building.
Designed by the same architects that planned the New York Public Library, the depot took less than 2 years to build, opening officially on April 16th, 1925.
Oh my gosh, the fanfare was incredible.
There was a parade, people in costume, a huge coming out party for the up-and-coming city of just 20,000.
And yet we had over 3,000 people jamming the station there, making sure that they could see the train that was coming in.
Historian Jennifer Stevens says the depot served as more than just a train station.
It was sort of, if you will, a landmark on the hill that could oversee the valley and also just really represented the hope and the promise of Boise's economic growth, its social growth, its draw to people around the country, and kind of put the city on the map, honestly, because now people who were traveling from east to west were going to have to come through Boise as part of their journey.
And what they would see then is a lot like what you can see today.
They get off the train, they see these gorgeous mountains. You can see our state capitol building from here. You can see buildings rising.
Over the next few years, they put in the Platte Garden, then Capitol Boulevard, and the grand entrance to Boise was complete.
Yeah, there's no question that they recognized the value of looking down into this valley and the view that it represented to the passengers that would come off and see what they were coming here to visit.
And there were some well-known passengers that did come to visit, like President Franklin Roosevelt in 1937, or singer Marianne Anderson in 1940, as Boise became a popular Union Pacific stop.
At the height of travel in the 40s, there were 6 trains coming through, 3 from the east and 3 from the west.
However, post-World War II, people began to opt for autos instead of trains.
It was cheaper, it was faster, and so train travel definitely declined in the post-war era, and eventually, the train service here stopped in 1997.
But that didn't stop the depot from standing out.
It really does.
Or standing as the symbol of the City of Trees for a century.
But I think the reason that it's made it 100 years is because people recognize just how beautiful and special it is, and what it represents to so many generations of Boiseans that have come before those of us who live here today. It's a community gathering space. It's a place that shows off the best of Boise and provides a space that we can all come together and recognize how incredible this place is that we live.
How iconic is that building? Just Google Boise and then hit the Images tab, and that's the view of the town you see is from the Boise Depot. Well, the city of Boise has been celebrating the depot all week long. Tomorrow, though, that's the big birthday bash. Starting at 5 o'clock, there's going to be live music, activities. There's going to be food trucks there and a lot more. The theme? Roaring 20s, so you might want to dress accordingly and dress to impress. It's free. It is open to the public. No tickets necessary, but make sure you walk or bike. You might want to do that or make plans for that because, as you can expect, parking is going to be limited. You could also take a free shuttle from Ann Morrison Park, so there's that option. And in case you can't be there, we're going to bring it to you live from the depot tomorrow here on the 208. Again, the entire show dedicated to celebrating the Boise Depot. They've been around since, well, the time of the dinosaurs, and at one point were thriving in the Snake River. That is before decades of overfishing and dam construction in the 1800s. And by the late 1900s, major conservation efforts have helped make white sturgeon, helped them make a big comeback. As Hunter Funk explains, this prehistoric species has been or is now putting Idaho back on the map, because I know they've been doing this for a while, right?
Yes, they've been doing it for a while. New research is also keeping them that way.
Nice.
Exactly. And it's for fine dining, fun fact. Idaho is actually #2 in the nation for sturgeon meat and caviar production. Second only to California. Maybe this is why they call it the Magic Valley, though, because over in Hagerman, there are spring-fed farms and they're raising world-class caviar. Now, it takes 14 years to raise a sturgeon before you can harvest the caviar, and there's fewer than 10 producers in the state. Well, if that raised your gills, turns out there's much more that meets the eye when it comes to Idaho's fish farming industry.
Hagerman and Buell, all along this region of the Snake River, is really kind of a mecca for aquaculture in the state. So we're #1 in rainbow trout production, #2 in sturgeon and caviar, #4, believe it or not, in warm water tilapia production, #5 in overall aquaculture product value. So the immense kind of water resources that we have here are extremely valuable.
Over at the University of Idaho Research Facility, they are focused on the fish's diet, seeing what changes to their food that they can make to lower production costs, also making sure the fish stay healthy and produce top quality caviar fillets. Now, coming up at 6, we're going to look at how they are doing this and how their research could keep Idaho's sturgeon industry profitable for decades to come.
Is this product in demand, Idaho caviar?
It sounds like it. I mean, there's less producers now than there was before, but there's still a growing need.
All right.
So
tune in at 6. Thanks, Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're kind of tight on time. Let's get right to your comments. This one from Charlotte. The whole country's watching Idaho and shaking their heads about how everyone is welcome poster is an issue. We look stupid. How embarrassing. Meanwhile, Cliff says it was Sarah who made it political with the sign because it was in rebellion and resistance to President Trump enforcing the law by deporting people in America illegally. It's not true, Cliff. We've talked about this. Maybe you missed it. That poster's been up in her classroom for 4 years before anyone said a word. 4 years it's been up in her classroom. When after Trump took office this time, that's when somebody mentioned it. By the way, does the clock really work? Hey, Gail, tune in tomorrow. We'll have the answer from the depot. See you then.
Continue with us and watch free now on the KTVB Plus app everywhere you stream.